All right. I will actually get started. And yes, so we'll just go ahead and get started since we're like going to start a minute early, which is kind of unique to start a little bit earlier today, but there is a lot of content this evening. So welcome to the Pendulum. My name is Serena Wadhwa. I'm your co-host. And I've got a few different things to talk about because it happens to be like a really busy month um, in the world. And so I'm going to talk about BIPOC mental health, self-care, and World Friendship Day because all of those are happening right now and coming up in the next week, actually. And so I just want to kind of give some definitions and explore a little bit about each of these three different topics and then provide some suggestions and resources because you'll find that all three of them actually fit quite well together. And it's interesting how all of them happen to be wrapped up right around the same time of each other as well. So, and also just to mention that the next episodes in August will be about Happiness Happens Month. So all of August will be focusing on happiness because with fall coming around the corner, and then of course with the sun going down, people's happiness levels tend to be affected by that. And, routines change with school coming back. And so we'll talk about happiness and kind of what contributes to that and ways that you can cultivate that during the fall and winter months, and also into the next year. All right, so to get started, let me see here. Oh, here we go. All right. So July is BIPOC Mental Health Awareness Month as a whole. And it is about promoting equity. And that's basically just, providing opportunities for individuals who identify in the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, to give them the same individuals, South Asian communities and other communities that may not have access to mental health care or substance use treatment or any kind of health care as it's accessible to other individuals. And then tomorrow is actually known as International Self-Care Day. And it's interesting why they chose tomorrow as being that day. And, I'll talk about that in a second. And then next Wednesday is actually World Friendship Day. So a great day to kind of wrap up July and some things that you can do to really hone in on Friendship Day itself. So here are just some suggestions in terms of promoting equity and some coping skills that tend to be very much relatable with individuals that may not have accessible services. And so when we're thinking about what kind of services to provide or what kind of services to look for, this particular article that this information is taken from kind of combines other factors as well. But one of the major things that's important is culturally competent services. And this is really focusing on recognizing cultural differences. And it's not just about racial and ethnical differences. It's also about age factors and about demographics, as a whole. So like people that might live in a rural community or, out in non-metropolitan areas are going to have different kinds of issues from people who live in metropolitan or like in a downtown area. That's going to be very different in terms of what kind of things that they might struggle with or what kind of resources are available, things of that nature. And then cultural pride is really huge as well. And there's lots of studies that indicate that cultural pride can be a source of promoting mental health, and especially in this day and age, really looking at, you know, what it is about origin, the person's history, what they understand about their history, I mean, I know that I've often, and this is something that, when I was younger, growing up, it was a source of, not being proud, of course, because I wanted to fit in with my peers in junior high and high school. And, that was difficult to do, but as I've come of age and I've grown into who I am as a person, there's a lot of pride that I have in my heritage and a lot of things that I've realized that I've carried through in my life that have really served me well in different, uh, stressors or in handling different things or just how I approach my own work. And so recognizing that, having, and one of the things that I've also heard from a lot of people too is, that some people that do not have this kind of background, where they don't really know where they come from, or they don't have a country of origin that has traditional, rituals and, a heritage or a history, so to speak, like this. That's something that can be a source of envy for them too. And I've heard that from quite a few people where they've talked about that either as clients or otherwise, just in social circles from other individuals. So cultural pride is something that could be very helpful in promoting as a coping skill. How do you take pride in this and how do you identify that pride? And not in a way that's like arrogant. It's not like, boasting. It's more about, what is it that it can be a source of strength? How is it that it can provide support and also um, uh, provide resources, because culturally speaking, every culture has very different resources within its own culture that can be a source of strength and provide resources in a very different way than things that are outside of that. The other thing that some of this research talks about are the differences between emotionally focused coping skills and problem solving focused coping skills. And they're differentiated between how they really work in terms of focusing on emotions or focusing on actually looking at what the problem is, identifying it, and then finding solutions related to it. And so, um, with emotionally focused coping skills, you're looking at how do you reframe the situation. Maybe you see some humor in it, maybe you share it with another person, and excuse me, and just kind of talk about it. There's a lot of research that demonstrates that just getting it out of your system in a way where you can express what's happening with you can be very helpful. So not suppressing emotion. Engaging in religion or spirituality, however that looks like for the individual, can be also a source of emotional focused coping. So how does a person rely on their faith? How does a person rely on their spirituality? How do they incorporate that? What meaning do they make of a situation or what's happening? Those are ways that can also be helpful. And dissociation is something that's important. I think I've talked about that before as well. But, dissociation is actually kind of a normal response to abnormal things that are happening, like not everyday kind of occurrences. These are things that can be very, very stressful or overwhelming to the system, to the organism. And so sometimes, just kind of that this dissociation that occurs when a person may feel um, like outside of themselves or they don't feel connected internally, is a way that the brain and the mind just kind of prevent an overwhelming sense of emotions from occurring because it prevents kind of like this emotional breakdown from happening. And so in some degree, it could be helpful, but it is not meant to avoid the emotional overload. And so that's also very important to recognize because there are times when people you know, will come to dissociate in times of severe distress where then it's hard for them to just cope with it and deal with what's happening. And that can then also provide more stress because then it's, how are you managing this? Then we have solving focused. So this is confronting, what the issue is. And this is not like confronting like, aggressively. I think confrontation gets a really bad rap. There's a really negative association with confrontation. So I like using the therapeutic confrontation definition, which is, really just kind of looking at incongruencies and really focused on, what is not working with this. Taking precautionary measures, this could be about really looking at what is needing to be preventative, what's happening in the environment or what it is that people need to prepare for. And that's a problem solving kind of coping skill. It's like, what is it that I need to prepare for in order to manage my mental health? What are some things that cause me stress? What are some things that I know, tend to affect my mental health? And how is it that I can prepare for those things before they happen? Like, for example, winter, fall, when the sun goes down, a lot of people get seasonal affective disorder. And so, what is it that people may need to do in order to prepare for that? And so that might be being more proactive. Limiting interactions, sometimes it is a case of looking at how do you limit interactions with toxicity. So this is about coping skills, about, areas that tend to be more toxic. The more interaction that people have with toxicity, the more toxic they become because it's affecting their own mental health. And so the idea is, okay, what are some ways that can be limited where, if you still need to engage for whatever reason, how is it that you can limit those interactions so it's not going to be so distressing? When is it required? When are you obligated? When is it that you can minimize the exposure that you might have? Things of that nature. Activism is another thing. So what kind of advocacy maybe perhaps that can be done in the community? What kind of things can you do to support others? What kind of things can be done as a group or as a community to promote mental health or to, remove barriers within the community? So for example, maybe there is an issue within a certain community about accessing something. And, as a community, maybe you go to the city hall, or maybe you talk about people that are able to make a difference or to provide resources, or look at how can we bring free resources into the community, things like that. Um, Community support, again, this is kind of, relying on resources that exist within the community. So this could be places of worship. This could be community uh, organizations that exist. This could be looking at the school system. This could be looking at other agencies that are active, and seeing, what they may have to offer and how to make them more accessible to people. And then the reality also of, society in general is just kind of looking at, what is actually happening. And so this research was taken back in 2006, but the reality, so it's kind of sombering to know that this is, 20 years ago, and not much has really changed from that, but it's recognizing that there is limited progress. We've had some progress, and now it seems kind of like some of that is going backwards. And these are the setbacks in society that are happening. And so a lot of times people feel that they're being judged, and it's already kind of like this scarlet letter being put upon them even before a person is willing to ask them questions or get to know them. And so the reality of the situation is that this is what people are encountering. And so how is it that you manage reality is by looking at, okay, if this is what I'm encountering all the time, what do I need to do in order to keep my mental health at a certain level so that I can deal with this? And so looking at different kinds of support that's needed. For example, what kind of emotional support, what kind of information may be needed, affiliational support. So this could be like resources. This could be like, is there like a certain task that you are looking to get done, or a certain procedure you're looking for? And instructional is like a how-to kind of a thing. Or affiliation is more like an organizational affiliation, like a um, oh my goodness, I just lost the word, like to be associated with kind of thing. So those are just some suggestions, that you can kind of think about. Maybe it might be educational kind of support, or a mutual aid support. There's lots of anonymous groups too that exist. And you can always do a search online for anonymous groups. There are so many virtual groups that exist right now online where you could even keep your cameras off, and you don't necessarily have to participate, but just knowing that other people are experiencing something similar that you're experiencing. Just, a lot of times what I hear from people when they attend different support groups is just knowing that other people are out there and they're not alone is very helpful. It's not that other people are suffering with it. It's just knowing that they're not doing this themselves, kind of a thing. And so tomorrow is International Self-Care Day. And I thought this was kind of interesting how the World Health Organization designated 7/24 as the day for International Self-Care Day, because, when you think about 7/24, it's like 24/7, right? It's like it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout the year. And so it actually started on June 24th, and it goes for the whole month. And they ended it on, tomorrow is the last day of it. So recognizing that tomorrow is like the culmination of International Self-Care Month, but tomorrow is the actual day. And so what International Self-Care Day is about is really not focusing so much on strategies, because I've talked about a lot of self-care strategies, and you've heard so many different kinds of strategies about self-care. Like, how do you take care of yourself, and how do you incorporate it into your schedule? And, what are some ways that you could do that? And you probably hear it from, a lot of different people too. But this really, I thought, was interesting how the World Health Organization talks about it in terms of really being more proactive with healthcare. That by us taking care of ourselves, it gives us more of a choice in terms of promoting our own health, in terms of preventing disease, and about controlling our own health too, because it gives us an opportunity to have a say-so in what our health looks like. And I found that to be a kind of an interesting, different way of talking about self-care. Because we often don't hear about self-care so much as about what it can do as preventative medicine, so to speak. We hear more about it in terms of this is what you need to do to take care of yourself, and here are some strategies, and go take a yoga class. And it's like, okay, I can do these things. But yet when you think about it in terms of, what is this, you know, at the end result, what is it that it can do? You know, a lot of times it really is about preventing um, heart disease, or diabetes, or preventing any kind of mental health issues or anything of that nature. So, it is a proactive stance to preventing illness from developing. So the more that we do for ourselves, and this is not necessarily saying, to be selfish about it, and yet at the same time um, it is really looking about what are some ways that I can be more proactive with my own health, so that it also allows me a say-so in what happens with my health. So that I'm not just feeling like my health is not something I have any control over. There's about 3.6 billion people who do not have access to healthcare. And, given the current circumstances, we know that there are going to be a lot of other people that are going to be losing that perhaps with a healthcare. And so here's an opportunity where, here's a really good time to start incorporating self-care practices, because it will give you a chance to be able to be more preventative. And, we don't live in a society that's necessarily about prevention. It is really about, you have to be really sick in order to get um, services. And so self-care is really about you taking control over your health and preventing it from happening, because that way you're kind of doing your part, so to speak, in terms of what can I do in order to help myself not get X, Y, and Z, whatever it may be. And so, you participate in what happens. And therefore you are a collaborator and in your health. So I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at self-care, and just wanted to present that as one perspective that the World Health Organization offers for that. So the next one is World Friendship Day, which is next Wednesday. So a week from today, which is really exciting because it kind of ends like, the end of July almost, I think, yeah, next Wednesday. And so this was actually developed by the United Nations. And 2011 is when it kind of originally started. And you could see here from the definition, about what a friend is. And, the idea of having friends is really important. There's a lot of studies that indicate friendships are important. And we also know that, statistically speaking, that friendship, as part of our social support network is a preventative matter too, because having a network of friends, and research indicates that this has actually declined in the last 20 years. So what research has indicated is that people were able to say that they had at least 5 close friends, confidants that they had, 5 of them. I think this was back in the early 2000s. That number has actually decreased. And so the rates of loneliness have increased quite a bit. And there's been some research that indicates that that's quite concerning for some people, that about 12%, I believe it said, of individuals do not feel like they have a person that they can confide in or talk with about, matters that they need to talk with. And so that's pretty staggering to hear. And so the idea with this is recognizing that isolation, loneliness, those kinds of things, when you think about the pandemic, oftentimes their loneliness increased quite a bit for a lot of people. A lot of people did not know what that experience. I know I was one of those people that did not know what that experience was like, because, before the pandemic, it was very easy to be able to be social and go do things with people. And then to be on lockdown and experience a quite opposite effect of that, the opposite end of that pendulum, very different experience. And a lot of people, resorted to things that, they did not have before. So the idea here is that, the Pew Research Center, there is an increase in number of individuals who report having no friends at all. So it is important to recognize that social networks affect mental health and chronic illness. And chronic illness is like medical issues, heart disease, respiratory issues, chronic pain, things of that nature, loneliness. And so friendships and social networks provide support, provide bonding, provide nourishment. They provide, other people, like a group where you can go and do things. It provides some sort of engagement, so to speak. This is why a lot of times that support groups work really well for people, because there are people that they go and they interact with. This is why people like doing activities with other people, meetup groups or Facebook groups, things like that are very popular because you have a community of people that have the same kind of interests. So there's lots of different ways that people can find groups of people or increase their um, social networks. And again, when we're talking about social networks and about friends, there are different levels of friendships, of course. But here you can look at, do you want more friends that you could do activities with? Do you want more friends that you can have more in-depth conversations with? Do you want more friends that you want to be more intimate with, like from an emotional perspective? Those are different ways that you can consider how friendships you want to develop. And so there are some certain action steps that you can do next Wednesday to increase your friendships and just let people know, that their friendship matters to you. And so you can reach out to them and just wish them a happy friendship day, because it's a World Friendship Day. You can call them or text them, somehow touch base with them, meet for coffee or, for a meal. Check in with people that you haven't talked with. Sometimes I know some people that do like a once a month kind of run through with people that they haven't connected with for a while. Every month they will check in with people that they haven't connected with for that month. Or they might send out like letters, or they might send out a text message or something. But somehow they just make sure that they stay in touch with people that they have not communicated with. And they take that responsibility on themselves, not really expecting anything in return, but for them, it just is a way to connect with other people. Um, and so the other action is increasing the quality, not necessarily the quantity. There is a difference between quality friendships and quantity friendships. So recognizing it is about the depth of the friendship and not about the amount of friendships. You can create opportunities for friendships. How do you do that is by saying yes to opportunities that come up, when people invite you to places, or, maybe there's like an activity that you see is being advertised in your community for something that you're interested in. Perhaps you attend that. There's lots of different ways that you can start conversations with people. I mean, I know people that start conversations with pretty much anybody. Like they go to the grocery store and they're having conversations with people, or they're out at a meal and they're having conversations with people, and they've actually developed friendships with people just by doing that. And so you can find friendships anywhere. It is just about taking that initiative. And if taking that initiative is not something that you are used to doing, because perhaps that's not something you're used to doing, or it's not part of who you are, that's okay. There are lots of different ways that you can do that without having to be that type of person as well. You can increase the quality of the friendships that you currently have as well. You can also send a letter or a message to people to invite them, like maybe your neighbors, or if there are people in your community that you want to get to know better. Those might be individuals that you establish a connection with instead, because proximity tends to be a central component of how people develop friendships. We tend to connect with people that are closer around us, because we see them more often, and it's easier by convenience to be able to get together. And so that might be a way that you connect with people as well. So that's World Friendship Day, some different ideas that you can uh, up your game, so to speak, if you want to do that, or at least kind of just acknowledge the friendships that you have. And if that is something that you struggle with, there are resources for that as well. You can always reach out to find those resources. There are lots of support groups to help with either having social anxiety, or if you struggle with being assertive, or you're not really sure how to make friends. There are lots of different ways that the internet offers with that. You can also contact a counselor to get a skills group. There are lots of different skills. Sometimes it's a skill that you haven't learned how to do that, and so it's just about finding a group that will help you feel more confident in developing that skill with it too. And you can always email me for resources as well if that's something of interest to you. I'm happy to share what resources that I can offer you. So that's what I have for you this week. I just wanted to see if there were any questions that anybody may have. I know that's a lot of information, but I wanted to kind of tie in how all of those things related to each other because they're pretty darn important for the end of July and one of the hottest days that we've had too. So I think that's Linda. Is that you with the iPhone 8? I'm not sure. I don't even know if you can hear me. But anyways, does anybody have, I don't know if anybody is watching or if anybody has any questions. And if not, then I will just thank you all for paying attention and for being here today, and hope to see you back in 2 weeks where we will talk about happiness. All right. Have a good rest of your month, and we'll see you back in 2 weeks. Thanks.